Choose the correct diameter collet and make sure you're putting all the pressure on the inner race of the bearing. You don't want to put any pressure on the cage of the bearing. So as you can see, this red collet fits the inner race perfect, so this is the one we'll use. We're also going to find a suitable socket to place underneath the steering stem to make sure we don't force it out of the lower triple clamp while we install the bearing. So go ahead and slide the installer down into place over the steering stem. Then use a hammer to tap the bearing down into place. You'll be able to tell when it's seated down all the way by the solid sound that it makes. Remove the tool and the collet. Now our lower bearing is installed. The next step is to clean up inside the neck of the frame so we can install the outer races. It's a good idea to slap a little grease in there to help the races slide into place. We'll install the top one first. Make sure the thicker end of the race goes down. We're going to use the Tuss steering stem bearing press to install both these races. So choose the correct size bearing driver and sit it down on top of the race and then slide the tool up from the bottom. Go ahead and install the handle. Now just make sure everything's aligned correctly and press the race down into the frame by turning the handle. You'll be able to feel when the race bottoms out, and it's important to make sure it seats all the way. Once you get to that point, you can push the quick release on the bottom of the press and quickly remove the tool and driver. Now that this top race is installed, we can repeat these steps to install the bottom race. So install that bottom race with the thicker section up. Next comes the bearing driver, and then we'll install the bottom part of the tool. Pull the race up into the frame by turning the handle. When you've got it seated, pull the bottom and remove the tool. Now both our new races are installed into the frame. We're going to put a little more grease onto the bottom bearing and also the top race. And then install the steering stem back into the frame. Slide the top bearing down into place, and we'll install a new dust shield and thread the spanner nut back onto the steering stem. Again, using the Tuss steering stem spanner wrench, we're going to tighten the nut down just as tight as we can get it. Now move it around a little bit to make sure the bearings are seated in the races. Then we'll just loosen it back up. Now when you get it loose, you want to just barely snug it down. Reinstall the top triple clamp with the washer and the nut. And next we'll reinstall the handlebars and top clamps. Go ahead and tighten those down. You also want to install both forks and just loosely snug the pinch bolts down. This is to ensure the top and bottom triples are aligned before we tighten anything down. We're also going to reattach the brake line guide and then install the front wheel. Tighten the right pinch bolts and then torque the axle nut to factory torque specs. We'll loosen those pinch bolts back up to make sure the fork is sitting where it wants to on the axle. When it is, tighten all 4 pinch bolts to factory specifications. Reinstall the caliper and then the brake line clamp. Now we're ready to make our adjustments up top. Tighten down the top steering stem nut just about as tight as you can get it. And then we'll check the resistance of the steering. You'll want to be sure and refer to your service manual for further instructions and specifications. But with our bike on the stand, we like the bars to fall with very little help from our finger. As you can see, this might be a hair tight. So we'll loosen the stem nut back up, and using a flat blade screwdriver, just barely loosen the spanner nut on the stem. Now just retighten the top nut and check the bars again. As you can see, these are falling with barely any help now. Adjust it to your preference and then torque the top steering nut to factory specs. Now you can reinstall the front fender and then torque your triple clamp pinch bolts to factory torque specifications. Reinstall your front number plate and then you're done. If you have any questions about replacing your steering stem bearings, feel free to give us a call at 1-800-336-54 888-888-3737 or visit us online at www.rockymountainatvmc.com. Rocky Mountain ATVMC carries all the parts and tools needed to replace the steering stem bearings on your bike. Thanks for watching.